Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
We had a little not technical hang-up. You had real work to do.
Yeah, every once in a while that happens. We'll start kibitzing, and before we hit record, I'll get a call or an email, and that happened today. So I've written. I'm less spry than I might otherwise be because I just spent the last couple hours writing a column.
So, Matt, I have to stop you here because we're coming on the first night of Hanukkah, and it's not. What did you say?
I think I said kibitzing.
Yeah,
is that wrong? Is that not Yiddish?
Kibitzing.
Is it? But a kibitz is something different, right?
You're thinking about a kibbutz. Which is the sort of, quasi-commune communities in Israel. But kibitzing is chit-chat.
No, I'm schwitzing. And it took a lot of chutzpah for me to even use that term, and now you've...
You said chutzpah correctly, so I'll give you that.
Now you've called me out. Is it going to be revealed that I'm not Jewish? I have to admit. I've been pretending to be for a long time, but no.
I remember in college people saying spiel, and it really just rankling me.
Spiel,
yes, not spiel.
Okay, so I'm getting all these right except for the one that I used.
Yes.
How do I say it, Bill?
Kibitzing.
What did I say?
I feel like the say it is so wrong, I can't get my brain around it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm not going to use that term again.
You said kibitzing.
Instead of kibitzing.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like you're being what my people call pedantic. But anyway.
I'm not even fully Jewish, but still I gotta take what I have and, stand my ground.
Well, so tonight's the start of Hanukkah.
First night of Hanukkah. I will be doing Hanukkah donuts and latkes this weekend.
It's awesome.
This is as far as I can go with my half Jewishness. So we will light candles. I'll make donuts and latkes once, and we'll play some dreidel. Like that's as good as I can do.
And I will keep with my tradition of playing the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song. So
see what's annoying about the Hanukkah song is that it's not a Hanukkah song. It's a list song about people who are Jewish. There's no Hanukkah to it.
Well, no, there is Hanukkah. David Lee Roth lights the menorah.
It's not telling a story or capturing a spirit of the holiday.
But a lot of how many? There's plenty of Christmas songs. Like, do you think "Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree" tells the story of the birth of baby Jesus?
Well, no. Well, obviously, Christmas has become, highly, commercialized and far removed from the literal story of Christmas. But there is, less fervently religious concepts of Christmas spirit and just celebration of how the holiday is enjoyed. Rocking around the Christmas tree is sort of in that vein. It's about celebrating the Christmas day without telling a literal story about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The Sandler's Hanukkah song isn't even that. It's just, here is a list of people who are Jewish. End of song.
But there's also that Christmas song, Mom Got Drunk and Dad Got Drunk at our Christmas party.
That's one of the great Christmas songs. Merry Christmas with the Family. Robert Olkeen. Although, as good as the original version is, I do feel the Jill Sobule version is slightly better.
Well, I have to hear that. I don't know that version.
It's not wildly different or anything. It's just I just thought her vocals were just a little more universal, I should say. I feel like Robert Earl Keen, as a more of a traditional country song, there's kind of like for lack of a better term, a bit of a white trash element to it, which has its charm. I'm not saying it's a bad version or anything. I just thought that Jill Sobule was had more of a universality to it.
Well, I'm going to try to start checking myself on the Yiddish, and I'll bring my A game next week.
All right. So outside of the holiday, there is actual news, and I feel like in liberal circles there is great horror at the last-ditch lawsuit led by the Texas AG, 16 other AGs on board, Trump on board, Cruz saying he'll argue before the Supreme Court if given the opportunity, with this most ludicrous scheme to basically try to give state legislatures free rein to just send whatever electors they want. No one thinks it's going to be upheld by the Supreme Court at this point, but there is an anxiety about what is this going to do to the fabric of democracy, to have this large swath of the country not accept the results, overtly trying to overturn the results from the popular will, overturn the Electoral College vote, or subvert it, if you will. Are you as disturbed by it, or is there a part of you saying, these people are just doing this is all performative? They all know it's nonsense. They know it's not going to go anywhere, and when it's over, it's going to be over, and we're going to just move on.
I'm more in the disturbed camp, Bill. I mean, I think you're right that the people who are doing this, they know. I keep thinking of Rocky IV. You thought we were past the pop culture part of this dialogue, but no. There's a scene in Rocky. There's a scene in. No, I'm sorry. This is Rocky I. And Rocky I, remember, Rocky is not supposed to be a real fight. Like Apollo Creed picks Rocky, just somebody that's going to be kind of a patsy, and he thinks he can easily beat him, and it's just. And there's a scene where Duke, Apollo's trainer, says, "He doesn't know it's a damn show. He thinks it's a damn fight." And by the way, Duke, no pun intended, really punches above his weight in all these movies. And the reason I was thinking Rocky IV is in Rocky IV, he says, like, "Throw the damn towel." When like Rocky's like holding the bloody towel while his best friend gets murdered by a Russian. But anyway.
That's Rocky IV.
That's Rocky IV. But in Rocky I, the line from Duke is, "He doesn't know it's a damn show. He thinks it's a damn fight." Well, I think these people, like the Attorney General of Texas, one of my wife's former clients, he knows it's a show. But the people out there, the rank and file conservatives, they think it's a damn fight. They believe it, right? So even though I agree that at the elite level, it's a performative show, this will have real ramifications because there are a lot of just average people who just honestly believe that this election has been stolen. And, Bill, I can identify with this to a certain degree. I've talked about this before, but like when I was younger, I would listen to Rush Limbaugh, and if he said something, I believed it. I didn't check it out. I had sort of outsourced my the details to Rush, and I trusted him. He was on my team. I was on his team, and he knew more about politics than I did. He was more connected than I was, and there was a point where I actually started working in politics, started learning about politics, and I went to a rally. And it was actually Sarah Palin was speaking at it. It was the day that Sarah Palin coined the term Mama Grizzly. And the next day I was listening to Rush Limbaugh's show, and I forget the details, but he was describing some of what happened at that rally, and he was wrong. And I knew he was wrong because I was there, and that's when I really started to see, like, a lot of the stuff I've been just trusting on faith is bullshit.
I'm not sure.
I can just tell you,
I'm not sure I've heard that story from you before.
Oh, have I? I thought I've talked about it.
Maybe you have, but it didn't sink in the way it is right now.
Yeah. So it was firsthand knowledge, but like think about my cousins, for example. Now you might, or my aunts or whatever. You might think that, I'll put it this way. If I had an uncle or a cousin who was a plumber and he said, "Hey, don't call this other plumber because you can't trust him. Like, I know him." I would defer to my uncle who's the plumber, and I would believe him. But it just doesn't work that way in politics. I don't think anybody in my family says, "Well, Sidney Powell seems like a great person to me, but cousin Matt, actually, that's a bad example because I've never met Sidney Powell, but Kellyanne Conway seems like a great person, but my cousin Matt has actually, talked to her numerous times and knows. But whatever the case may be, normal people have never been in that rally that Sarah Palin rally. So a lot of people have just outsourced the details to opinion leaders on the right. And so I think it is a serious thing.
And Rush Limbaugh is openly talking about secession, as he did this week, saying, I'm hearing from people that, we may have to consider secession. I'm not all the way there yet myself. But, it's a legitimate question. What do we have in common with these people in New York? Which sort of skipped over that the guy you love so much is from New York.
And Rush Limbaugh lived in New York for like 20 years in New York City, I think.
And also the notion that just because you disagree with somebody in a different state, therefore you can't be in the same country with them is also sort of an odd concept. But so I agree with you in part that, certainly there is this faction of people who are probably never going to get over it, who are going to believe that it was rigged, who are going to be fed that line by prominent people. But I do go back to what was going on the left in 2000, 2004. Now, look, I'll say it again. Gore was robbed. I still say Gore was robbed. I think it's not fantastical. There is evidence to that point. There was the AP analysis of the ballots that said if he did a full recount, you looked at undervotes and overvotes, he would have eked it out by a few. You could certainly make a counter argument that, well, Gore wasn't pursuing that strategy and therefore it wouldn't have happened. But I would still argue that if you literally count all the votes, he would have won. And the Supreme Court intervened prematurely, unnecessarily. But even though a lot of people on the left are like me, as angry as they were about it and never called Bush legitimately elected for that reason, we're still standing today. And then even in 2004, which was a far more dubious charge that the election was stolen in Ohio with Diebold machines and that kind of stuff, which is a bit more analogous to what we're talking about today. And there are people, and I at that point, I was starting to push back on that more and saying, look, stop talking about Diebold all the time because you don't want people to not vote, thinking that it's rigged.
Right.
And even though people did push the black box argument for a long time, Democrats still showed up and voted in 2006 and took the House, and then showed up to vote in 2008 and Barack Obama won. So I think there is a limit to the significance of a fringe faction not accepting the results and having the underpinnings of democracy being weakened.
This is worse than that, Bill. And let me say, this brings to mind two things. Like, one is part of why I really felt the left was like crazier than the right for a long time. And there were things like the 9/11 truther thing, and you mentioned the Diebold or whatever, all these conspiracy theories and whatnot. So I was really surprised at this when Trump emerged and this really like disproportionately hit the right. Not that the left doesn't have problems, but disproportionately this has hit the right. But having said that, this is worse than what you're describing, Bill. It is dramatically worse.
Well, it's worse because Trump is leading the charge. You have a sort of that, Gore threw in the towel. Kerry threw in the towel.
Right.
And there are people on the left, Michael Moore starts Fahrenheit 9/11 by chastising Gore for accepting the Supreme Court result, as if he should have tried to stoke a civil war over it. And I hope we see today, that Gore, as much as I think he was robbed, I think Gore did the right thing. So the Supreme Court ruled, and that is our system, and you had to accept the result. So it's definitely different to have Trump out there, and will probably continue to be out there for as long as he's living, pushing that. But so the question remains: how significant will that be? How much does it matter that he's putting it out there?
Millions of people are convinced that Donald Trump won the election and that it was stolen from him. And I don't know if it's because that the North Koreans sailed to Maine with fake ballots, or because Hugo Chavez has a supercomputer that changes votes, or if it's because of poll workers in Philadelphia. They are convinced. I was listening just this morning, West Virginia Public Radio, and they'll, I don't know, they go and they'll play like Steve Inskeep and the national broadcast, and then they go to the local guys, and the local guy is just talking to regular West Virginians, and they are just utterly convinced.
The host or the callers?
Not the host.
Okay.
The people he's interviewing. Mm-hmm. He's going out sort of interviewing man on the street type people. They're convinced it was stolen. And we have people who are talking about being willing to die for Donald Trump, willing to die for this cause. We have people who are Christian leaders and people in the faith community and prominent televangelists and different folk like that who are, trying to use the power of prayer and faith to overturn this election. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I used to think that, maybe someday America could fall apart, but it would probably, the condition we're in, it would probably take like at least 100 years to get to that state. Like in the last 5 years, I've gotten so much more concerned about the state of this country. And we have a lot of the people in this country are cult members, Bill. And there's a lot more crazy, just insane people than I thought.
Well, you're seeing more on your own side. I mean, there are plenty of crazy cultish people on the left over the years. I mean, you had, left-wing domestic terrorist outfits like Weather Underground in the 60s. So it's like
this is worse. This is worse, and it's worse because of Trump, and it's worse because of technology. It's really. I mean, I know people try to comfort us by saying like, well, we had a civil war once, or well, there were all these bombings in the 1960s and 70s, and there's crazy stuff that's happened. There's no doubt about it. But like the conditions right now it's really hard to compare them. Well,
look, I mean, I would not be surprised if somebody on the Trumpist far right did something violent. I mean, we've had domestic terrorism before on the left and the right. We had Oklahoma City. We had the CNN van bomber, under Trump and other assorted incidents. So it's not like that would be surprising. And I'm not trying to be sanguine about it and saying we should just shrug our shoulders at it. Obviously, domestic terrorism and the killing and maiming of people is horrible. But that doesn't mean
also
that.
When we have and I agree, those are. But then we also have like state attorneys general, trying to overturn an election. We have ostensibly serious people in important elected positions. My attorney general here in the state of West Virginia is part of that. I voted for him. I regret voting. I wouldn't vote for him tomorrow. I voted for him in November.
Well, this says to me, this seems more likely to cause a divide in the Republican Party more than it's going to make democracy in America untenable. Because there are sane Republicans. There is the Georgia Secretary of State. There are plenty of people in Washington, even if they can't get the words President-elect Joe Biden out of their mouths, they are going to do something normal once Biden is officially inaugurated and go to the White House, meet with them, talk to them on the phone, try to pass legislation. So if we end up with there being a faction of Republicans that follow the Lynn Wood strategy and don't show up to vote, I mean, that's bad for Republicans. I don't know if it's bad for democracy writ large.
Well, look, I mean,
if a faction decides to check out,
what's going to happen the next time there's a close election? What if Joe Biden? I mean, this doesn't sound like Joe Biden, but What if the Democrats decide, hey, these people are crazy. We have to make, we have to play hardball too. The next election.
Well, I mean, as we know, there are Democrats who do feel that way. I mean, how you define hardball, obviously, can go in a lot of directions. But there was, leading up to Election Day, plenty of Democrats saying we need to nuclear option, pack the court, make Puerto Rico D.C. a state, maybe Guam, maybe Virgin Islands, maybe carve up California. I mean, not everybody was in the exact same boat, but all these things were put out there, and all based on the notion of, this is zero sum. Republicans would do it if they had the chance. We can't be a bunch of suckers and be played for patsies. We have to play rough. Now, Biden pushed back on all of that. And by the nature of the outcome, Democrats can't even do those things, even if they wanted to do those things. Even if Ossoff and Warnock win, they're not going to be able to make the filibuster because Manchin and Sinema at minimum wouldn't let them do it. So you're going to have 2 years of Biden-led attempts to pull the country together and to work in a bipartisan way. And we don't know how that's going to work. We don't know if there are enough Republicans who will play ball. But while Trump, Rush, et cetera, are going to be trying to undermine things, there is somebody above them trying to go in the opposite direction.
I just want to talk for a second about the identity crisis that I've been going through for years now. There was a time when I would have thought, Newt Gingrich, he's eccentric. Churchill was eccentric, but Newt's a brilliant guy. He's got a lot of ideas. That's a serious person. We got that. Rudy Giuliani, mayor of America, serious person. Cleaned up New York, rose to the occasion at 9/11, inspirational leader. And just Trump has just systematically destroyed anything that you could be proud of, anything that it just makes you question all sorts of things. What else were you wrong about? Like Rush Limbaugh. There was a time, man, I could tell you, because I think radio is a powerful medium. And there was a time when I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh for, 2 or 3 hours a day, every day, almost. I would have him on my boombox while I was mowing the lawn, or I would be listening to him, driving in the car every day. And there was a time when, if Rush Limbaugh had died, I would have been just crushed. It would have, I don't even know him. I've never met him, but it would have been traumatizing almost to me, like losing a friend. And then to see all of these people during the Trump era, I mean, it's not like they were perfect before Trump, but this whole thing, and just since the election, Bill, I might have thought, okay. And then there's people like Eric Metaxas, who I know and used to respect, who has just, beclowned himself and undermined his entire Christian witness and conservative legitimacy. He's in my book, Bill. It's one of the regrets of my book. The editor made me put in a chapter on optimism and including people that we should keep an eye on who are actually kind of heroes right now. And he was in the book, and I wish he wasn't. It's to see what Trump has done. And since the election, it's gotten worse, because you could have argued, well, these people, they're toadies and they're sycophants, but it's one thing to be like a homer when the game is, being played, but after the election's over and they're still not accepting the results of the election and they're not, supporting the peaceful transfer of power, it's unconscionable and excusable, and it forces me to just continue to confront the fact that, now here's the thing, my religious faith is not put in any human person, and therefore it cannot be ruined by being disappointed by any human person. And likewise, man, my political philosophy is not based on any living, politician. But so it doesn't destroy my faith or my philosophy, but it forces me to like grapple with this, and then I'll shut up. But that's me. But what about a young person who isn't sure what they believe in? Why on earth would they want to join up to something that has been tarnished and associated with Donald Trump? Any decent person would run the other direction.
I mean, I think this is a serious problem for the Republican Party. I don't think the Republican Party is going to get very far clinging to Trump and a basic detachment of reality. There's going to, even if it's 75% of the Republican Party wants to go down that path, losing that 25% is a problem for them. Now, I do think parties can have some pretty rapid comebacks. Goldwater to Nixon was pretty rapid. McGovern to Carter was pretty rapid. I mean, these aren't exact analogous situations. William Jennings Bryan, who, wasn't detached from reality, but was peddling something fairly radical and, not losing by a lot against McKinley. People have noted, we've had this string of very close elections between 2000 and 2020, with only 2008 really being a big margin. This is the second biggest margin in 2020. But except for 2008, it's all within 5 points. Very unusual to have a stretch of 5 or 6 elections in that narrow range. But the only time we've had a longer stretch of that is between 1876 and I think 1900. And Bryan's campaigns were part of that. And even though the guy was losing, he was losing not by a lot, and he had a fervent hold on the Democratic Party, and they wouldn't let him go. But even then, the Democratic Party still recovered.
Yeah.
He eventually,
See, I feel like you're looking at this as a electoral challenge for the Republican Party. I think this is a much deeper problem, because I think that so first of all, I don't think this has manifested itself primarily on the right, but it suggests to me that Americans are dumber and crazier than I ever thought. And yeah, my side is worse, but I suspect that the things like reality TV and Twitter, and the lack of faith and trust in institutions are, they're a bipartisan phenomenon. They don't just affect the right. So, and even if it just was, limited to the right, if you've got tens of millions of Americans who are delusional, who feel cheated and aggrieved and see themselves as victims, that's a problem for everybody. And it's not just an electoral problem, like, the Republicans are going to have to get their house in order if they want to win elections again. Like this, I see this as a deeper, more systemic, spiritual, psychological, sociological problem.
See, I think it's more of a problem for you than it is for me.
But I think this speaks to our different worldviews. I mean, I think that, look, this is an interesting point. 10 years ago, when we were starting off doing this, I remember having a conversation with you where I was talking about how I viewed America as tenuous. And I felt like the left just thought America was as resilient as could be. You can do social experimentation, you can do social engineering, you could, tear down institutions and just keep chugging along. And I thought that was, I don't want to say naive, but I thought it was dangerous, because I think what we have is a miracle. The civilization we have is miraculous, and it's a blessing, and I don't want to futz around. Is that right?
Yeah, futz is good. Futz is okay.
I don't want to futz around. I don't want to take any chances, because it's precious, And I felt like the left was all about, well, she can handle anything we throw at her. I'm like, well, I don't know. And you're like, oh, more immigrants. And then, as many as, they don't have to speak the language. And I'm like, well, we at some point, and now, like, I'm arguing the same. I'm still making the same point. My point is still the same. Like, this thing could topple. This thing is tenuous, but you're still making.
But the threat you think is different. You think the threat is different.
Yes, but you're still arguing. Oh, she can handle all we throw at her. We're resilient. We always find a way.
Well, I do think we find a way. But I'm more charitable than you. You are being your standard coastal elitist and calling all these voters dumb and crazy. And I think that there's definitely a college non-college divide. I mean, a little oversimplistic. That's not that every non-college person is a Trump or every college person is a Biden voter, but there's definitely a skew there. And I think we have seen, and I don't think the argument is that if you're a college-educated voter, you are smarter than a non-college voter, but I do think your approach to information and what you trust is very different, or can be very different. So a Trump argument that don't trust the egghead scientist about COVID, look at me, I beat this thing through my sheer will. Someone who is a non-college voter might not have the same intrinsic trust of scientists that a college voter might. Again, and that's not 100% across the board. Obviously, there are college people who buy into the anti-science thing and non-college folks who accept science. We're talking about probabilities and proportions here. And I think those kinds of divides have been with us, forever. I mean, you look at how did Christianity react to the theory of evolution? There was a divide within the Christian faith over how do you treat the Bible literally or not with this information. And those who are more science-oriented said, I guess we have to treat the Bible more allegorically now. And others said, that's ridiculous. I don't care what Charles Darwin says. This is literal, end of story. So it's not an unusual divide culturally for America or any other country to have to experience. What I do think maybe is maybe different, maybe not, is you have someone in the presidency for a few more weeks, and a lot of people within that party saying, hey, there's a market for nonsense. There's a market for peddling things that are manifestly untrue because we have a bond with these people. They trust us more than they trust the media and trust the scientists, et cetera. And even if we can't win the presidency with those people, we can still function as a party. We can still win some elections. We can still be players by marketing in that kind of misinformation, which I think is not good. I'd much rather the Republican Party and the Democratic Party operate on the same arena of factual information. But if the Republican Party wants to go down that path, I say, hey, good luck. Good luck to you. The rest of us will move on without you then.
All right. Well, I just want to make the point. You're the one who introduced the education and my criticism of crazy and stupid people is not based on whether they went to college, just for the record. But I will say, you know what really annoyed me lately? Trump had some line about how, he's implying he couldn't have possibly lost because he won. He said nobody's ever won Ohio. And do you remember what the other state was?
Oh, Florida.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, no one has won the presidency without winning Florida and Ohio.
And so the implication was,
which is not true, by the way, because Nixon won without Florida and Ohio.
I know, so it's a lie to begin with. But let's just forget that. We'll forget that part. And by the way, Nixon very well may have had that.
Or Nixon lost. Was it 60 or 68? I forget which one we're talking about.
I think it was 60, the one that Nixon probably had stolen from him. But
so maybe that's not a good fact point then.
So it's not a great point. But let's just forget Nixon for a second, and let's just assume that Trump is right. It is an interesting trivia question. It would be an interesting trivia question were it true, but it's also irrelevant. Like, Okay, so now you're the first. You're the first guy to but I saw a video of these people, these MAGA supporters
on New York City streets.
Did you see that, Bill?
Yeah, I did.
And they're saying there's no way that Trump lost. Look it up. No one's ever won no one who's ever won Florida and Pennsylvania lost the election. Trump couldn't have lost. And it's like, A, it's not true, but B, so what? Just because it hadn't happened before. And here's the other one that gets me, Bill, that I think is Trump keeps talking about nobody's gotten more votes than him. No president, no incumbent president has ever gotten more. He got more votes than Barack Obama. And I'm like, well, the population keeps increasing, right? I mean, look, I'm sure, I'd have to look this up, but I'm sure that Herbert Hoover got more votes than George Washington. Does that mean that Herbert Hoover was a better president than George Washington? Probably not. Well, it's introducing, it's sophistry, it's introducing these bits of trivia as if they're conclusive, as if they're dispositive. And it allows stupid people to glom on to smart sounding facts. And it's just if nothing else, it's super annoying.
Well, look, as nonsensical as it is to make those arguments, after 2016, I heard people say things like Hillary Clinton got over 65 million votes. She's the first woman, to get. Obviously, that's the first one, but she had the third most popular votes in the country. Therefore, she's inherently more legitimate. Or this shows how strong a candidate she was because she cracked 65 million votes. And the same point applies. As much as I think highly of Hillary Clinton, she got 48% of the vote.
Yeah, but she did win the popular vote. And although that is meaningless in terms of who the president is, I do think it's a check mark. I mean, it's not nothing. Hillary can say she won the popular vote.
But I mean, saying she won the popular vote is something.
It's something.
But people talked about the actual raw number as if that showed that she was so incredibly successful a candidate, one of the greatest candidates of all time.
Right.
And no, she got 48% of the vote.
Right.
Obviously, I wish she would have won. I think she would have been a good president. But
Trump
as far as electoral performance, it was not a strong electoral performance. Yeah. And people who should know, there are people talking about Biden's vote total. I mean, he's the first to ever get 80 million votes. So what? I mean, look, I think it's a solid win. It's not that close, but he got 51%, and that's hardly the strongest performance or anywhere close to the strongest performance of presidential electoral victories.
Right, like Reagan won 49 states. And I bet you, I'd have to run the numbers, but I bet you that Joe Biden got more votes than Ronald Reagan.
Oh, of course he did.
Okay, and so did Trump, probably, right?
But so my point is that people who should know better, people who do know better, still can be very attracted to simplistic to the point of being wrong talking points because they're so blinded by partisan loyalties.
Oh, I agree. But here's the difference. Trump is he's taking it to the next level.
Sure.
Trump is saying, I couldn't have lost. I could not have. Joe Biden must have stolen the election because I got more votes than any incumbent president in history. He's not saying, therefore, I did pretty good. He's not saying, even though I lost, I could hang my head high. That's not what he's saying. Because actually, I would agree with that. If he said, "Oh, I got more votes than any incumbent president. We gave it our best, and I'm proud of," I'm like, fine. But he's implying, I got more votes than any other incumbent president. Therefore, it's inconceivable to think that Joe Biden beat me. Therefore, the election was stolen. And these people believe it. I mean,
obviously nonsense, obviously corrosive. History will look poorly on him, at least those historians who write objectively, not whatever cottage industry of pro-Trump history books they'll get written over the course of the next several years. My only point is that the seemingly weird and cultish blind acceptance of those nonsensical talking points should not be that surprising, because people who are hardcore will repeat lots of things that are not the strongest of arguments when they are really tightly bound to their candidate. And so I just don't know if we should assume this means that the democracy is in trouble, that there's no way we can go on if there is a faction of people who are spouting nonsense like this, because people have spouted nonsense for a long time.
Sure. And I don't think that it's inevitable that we're going to have a collapse, but I do think democracy is in peril.
Well, there's a reason. I mean, the things that people keep wanting to kneecap, the things in our democratic system that are not straight majoritarian. I mean, these are the things that keep the country together. Rush Limbaugh saying, well, we can't be in the same country with New Yorkers because we don't agree with them on stuff. I mean, that is the whole idea of having a government where it goes beyond tyranny of the majority. I mean, Jerry Brown said it in Joe Trippie's podcast earlier this year. You need it. I'm not quoting him verbatim. We have a system where, 51% of the vote doesn't mean you get 100% of the power. We have a system where if you're in the 49%, you still get something out of it. It's not offensive to me that the Supreme Court is run by people who were appointed by those who are on the losing end right now. I mean, as much as I might not like some of the decisions, and certain things would be a line too far for me, but the basic concept of the Supreme Court playing some kind of counter-majoritarian check is the point. The fact that the Senate has a disproportionate skew towards smaller states is the point.
I'm all for that, and I don't want to go to a direct democracy. Bill,
but my point is that because these things are there, and because you have in Joe Biden someone who is amenable to spreading the power around. I mean, it's going to require enough Republicans in the Senate to be cooperative, and I can't predict that they're going to do that. But assuming that those people can be found, I mean, that's how you get past these moments. When people say, you know what, I came on the short end of this, but I'm not being completely cut out of everything. My voice is still being heard. I'm still shaping policy. I can still function and pursue my dreams and have a livelihood in this country. I don't need to leave it. That's how you get past these moments in history.
And just since you mentioned the court, I wanted to bring up the 9-0 decision. It was like a unanimous decision not to, for the Supreme Court not to take up Trump's, the latest of Trump's.
Well, that's the Pennsylvania case, right?
Yeah.
They haven't dealt with the Texas case. Now,
not yet, although. Here's rooting for Ted Cruz to get a chance to represent.
I'm waiting for the Trump presidency docudrama. Starring Donald Trump. He'll probably be the star of his own movie. Premiered on OANN.
And he'll probably be a horrible actor, even playing himself.
It doesn't end with Trump at the podium announcing Dow 30,000, or will it end with Ted Cruz gallantly defending the case before the Supreme Court? I don't know what the climactic ending is going to be.
Can I ask you a hypothetical?
Yeah.
Let's say Ted Cruz somehow had been on the Supreme Court, was on the Supreme Court. Does he act like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, or does he act like Ted Cruz?
Yeah, once you're on the court, your time horizon changes. You don't care if Trump is president or not. You have a certain amount of power that lasts for as long as you're alive and in that seat. And who the president is totally irrelevant to you.
So you think if Ted Cruz were on the court, he would have voted with Brett Kavanaugh on this Pennsylvania case, probably?
On that case, yeah, I'm pretty confident of that. This is a guy who knows, because he has said so, that Donald Trump is a pathological liar. But he says what he's saying right now because he's concerned about keeping his seat and being a man in good standing in the Republican Party. Once you're on the Supreme Court, it's a whole different deal. Now, what I am curious about with this Texas case, though, I'm sure it will get rejected in a unanimous vote. Does the Supreme Court issue a unanimous opinion with very sharp language putting down the ridiculousness of the case, or do they simply dismiss it with no opinion? You know, they flick it off their shoulder, in effect, but not with force, not with vociferous condemnation that even got to them in the first place.
One could only hope.
We've talked about this a lot, but do you have any, if it's okay to shift gears, do you have any thoughts on where the Biden cabinet process is? Do you think he is still putting together a team of experienced professionals? Are you worried that he is starting to veer off of that track by having to cash in too many favors, or having to check too many diversity boxes, or some of the left think he's too many people who are personally close or have corporate ties who are not going to be big enough reformers? Does anything about the process make you pause, or do you still like where he's going with it?
You know, I've become a little bit more concerned. I'm not, panic level yet, but a little more concerned. So we've talked a little about Neera Tanden. I mean, she's not in the cabinet, but
no, that's a cabinet post. That's a.
Oh, is it technically a cabinet post?
Yes.
I know it takes Senate approval.
Yes.
For her, which could be a problem. So we've talked about her already. The other two are the HHS. Is it Javier Becerra?
Yeah, I believe that's right.
And apparently, he has a track record of kind of going after people of faith and going after pro-lifers. I'm not an expert on it, but I've read some stuff that Ross Douthat and Tim Carney have written that give me some concern. That he could be like an activist in that position. So that seems like a problem. It's also somebody who I don't think is like a health expert per se, right? He was like a congressman and sort of, an activist attorney general or something. I don't know if you know more about that, but that seems concerning. The other one, Bill, is the Department of Defense, Pentagon, nominee. And I would just say I'm, and this has been criticism mostly from the left, I think, but I am sympathetic to the argument that there should not be a waiver, that we should have civilian control of the Pentagon, and that this has now become a trend, because this will be the second administration that has sought this waiver consecutively, and that I am sympathetic to the argument that is a problem.
Well, what do you want to start with first, Becerra or Austin?
Becerra.
I mean, to the extent that he is not, he's a Democratic politician who isn't readily embraced by Republicans, to me that only is a concern insofar as can he get the votes. Is it going to be a McConnell-run Senate that's going to try to block him? I don't think it hasn't been a requirement that you have a particular expertise in health policy. And mind you, it's not like Becerra did nothing on health policy when he was in Congress. I think he was involved in the shaping of the Affordable Care Act. It's not like he's going to be like, what's health policy? But I don't think there shouldn't be a rule. Just like there shouldn't be. We're talking about there should be a waiver that you can't be a military person to run the Pentagon, but you have to be a doctor or a pharmaceutical executive to be at HHS. Like, that doesn't make sense to me either.
I do think, though, but civilian control of the military is a bigger concern, and it's something that's been, I mean, go back to Truman. I mean, it's been a problem.
But but it can be a problem to have somebody too close to an industry.
Sure.
Being in charge of a cabinet. I mean, liberals are always mad when, the coal lobbyist becomes head of the EPA. And they don't love it when pharmaceutical executives become head of HHS. But in my mind, it's the integrity of the person that matters first and foremost. And to some extent, your ability to be a good manager. There are people who manage bureaucracies who may not be the most intimate in knowledge of the particular policy order, but remember, these are people who have tons of deputies. And at the deputy secretary level, you damn well better have a lot of health policy expertise. But we've had people who are HHS secretaries. Kathleen Sebelius was a governor. Michael Levitt was a governor. Tommy Thompson was a governor. They weren't people who came out of the health industry. They were politicians and managers. That's not unusual for cabinet secretaries to be. And for Becerra he's not just a congressperson. I mean, Dick Cheney went to defense secretary coming out of the House. He wasn't I mean, the Pentagon's a pretty complex bureaucracy. And he wasn't, a managerial expert. Becerra at least runs the AG's office in California. He was not some ramby-pamby state. And I think knows how to manage. Now, has he been pro-choice in his policy choices as a politician, as an AG? I'm sure he has. But that's going to be true for any Democrat running HHS.
Well, it just, again, I mean, this is more of a Ross Douthat, Tim Carney thing. But it seems like he has been kind of going out of his way as a progressive activist to go after, I think I saw the Little Sisters of the Poor, things like that. So that seems concerning. I mean, again, Joe Biden's whole MO is being, a centrist, a uniter, not a divider. And
that's why I feel like going into people's past, and like people should get vetted. These things. I'm not saying these things are illegitimate to discuss, and this is a criticism I have of people on the left and the right who nitpick on cabinet picks. The president makes the policy. Everyone likes to talk about personnel as policy. So you pick this person and they did this before, therefore that means they're going to they did X in their past, they're definitely going to do Y in the future. If Joe Biden tells Becerra, hey, lay off Little Sisters of the Poor, I got to work with the Catholic vote, Becerra's going to say, yes, sir. So I just don't see that stuff as being imminently disturbing because the person making the call is the president the person got elected by the people.
Well, I think obviously a president will be outlining, the broad strokes of his agenda. But the reason you just said that these, cabinet members are managing, thousands of bureaucrats, right? Well, I mean, there's tons of decisions that are made that are important decisions that, like, the whole reason to have a hierarchy and a chain of command is that you can't make all the decisions.
Yeah, but anything that's going to potentially cause a massive culture war battle in the land, that's the kind of decision that will get pushed up to the president's level. That's not.
Maybe eventually. Remember the whole IRS scandal during the Obama years.
Which was a non-scandal.
Was it a non-scandal?
I mean, maybe you and I might disagree on this.
I feel like it was a real scandal, but anyway, whatever.
It was treated like a scandal by someone on the right, but I think all the evidence shows that they were not targeting organizations based on their politics.
My outrage receptors have been burned out by Trump, so I don't want to fight about something that no one else remembers from 10 years ago. Whatever the case may be, again, I'm not hitting the panic button yet, but I think Biden should, and are some of these picks being, you mentioned, are these picks being made for, optics, for, diversity reasons? that's a legitimate question. I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you that there is pressure on Joe Biden from different parts of the left to make identity politics choices.
Well, I mean that is pretty overt. I mean, Biden ran on my cabinet's going to look like America, which is very much how Bill Clinton ran on.
He ran promising to pick a woman as his running mate,
and having a black woman be the first Supreme Court justice. I mean, Biden's not hiding the ball on this. He's been pretty upfront that these will be factors in his decision making. The question then is he showing that you can be deliberate in having diversity be an important factor, and also putting together a very competent, qualified cabinet that people can get behind. And in all the criticisms that are being made here, there's very few, this person's not up to the job. This person has people are making a little bit of that with Becerra. I don't think it holds a lot of water. I think his credentials perfectly match up well with many other HS secretaries. So it's not like he is unusually underqualified. But I think he's the only one where that's even really becoming a thing at all. With Austin, it's not. He has no business being defense secretary based on his resume or his skills. It's that there should be this principle of at least 7 years before you're after out of the military. Neera Tanden, it's not. Some people are saying, well, what budget policy expertise does she have? Well, she actually has worked inside the government before, and she is the executive of a major organization. So yeah, she actually does know budgets fairly well. So that's not. I don't think it's a serious critique of her.
I mean, I think the other problem that people like me are going to have, or conservatives are going to have, is who's next in line. I mean, if Neera Tanden goes down, as she might, is the next person going to be more conservative than her or more progressive than her?
Well, especially if the attack on her is not based on ideology. She had mean tweets. Then you'll pick someone who doesn't have mean tweets and will probably still be hit the same philosophy that Biden wants in the OMB chair.
Or worse. I mean, it's possible that you end up with somebody worse. I mean, look, I think Republicans are going to want to get a couple of scalps, and they're probably going to have the Senate, and they probably will have the power to get those scalps. And I suspect that they will. But then I wonder what Biden does. At what point does Biden start naming interim secretaries?
Well, that might be where he goes. I mean, Biden is going to run the government the way he wants to run the government, run the executive branch. You're not going to make him change his own agenda by taking out a cabinet member here or there. Now, let's say with defense secretary, I mean, I think clearly, to some extent, race may be an issue there. But I think more importantly, when you hear Biden talking, hear about the backstory, it's the closest between the two of them. Bo worked with Austin, so there's that tie. When Biden was having his navigation of the Pentagon as vice president, Austin was someone who was seen as an ally. I think that's primarily what drives Biden here. And Biden is basically saying, I need someone that I can trust and work closely with, and Lloyd Austin is that person. So don't force me to pick somebody who I don't have that relationship with. And if he can't get the waiver, and he has to pick somebody who is qualified on paper but doesn't have the same relationship that he has with Biden, maybe that working relationship is not as good. Maybe it improves over time. I don't know, but that's the risk there, which is less ideological than more about just efficient, competent government where things are working smoothly. But
I will say, just this argument in general, Bill, that we've had the last 10 minutes has lowered the blood pressure. Though it's nice to just have these normal political debates.
Yeah, I mean, in the annals of cabinet battles, this is all pretty, low key. I mean, we don't even have a tax evasion question yet. There's no drunken behavior, sexual misconduct charge like with John Tower, or Andy Putzer, Labor had spousal abuse allegations thrown at him.
We don't know, Bill. We don't know why some people didn't get picked. That's the thing you don't know.
And then the way it should be. shouldn't be dragging those reputations.
There's a reason why some of the people that we thought should have been picked did not get nominated.
So you have a hesitation with the waiver, right?
A little bit. I mean, I would just say this, and I think this is an argument mostly pushed by the left, but I am sympathetic to the idea that there should be civilian control of the Pentagon, and that that this would be also the second consecutive administration that did this, that got this waiver. And I don't think it's a crazy concern. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. I don't know how I would vote on this pick on Austin, but I think it's something. It's not a crazy thing to be concerned about.
It's not crazy. I do think it is potentially overblown. I mean, look, there is civilian control of the military. It's called the commander-in-chief. Biden controls the military at the end of the day, and he is a civilian. So that does not change. And I don't see, there are plenty of people in this world that love citing Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell address because he lays out the concerns about the military-industrial complex. But, of course, Dwight Eisenhower was one of the few people who have been military generals who became president. I mean, he literally went from Supreme Commander of NATO right into the presidency. I mean, I'm sure some people at the time...
There was an election in between.
Yes. But we didn't destroy the basic idea of civilian control of the military by that election. And there are people in Andrew Jackson's time that didn't like the fact that he had a military background, thought that was a violation of principle that he got that. But, we're all still standing. That happened and we're still standing.
Well, this goes back to your talk me down, nothing's a big deal.
Well, especially in this case, you're basically saying it is of such an importance that Lloyd Austin has only been out of the military for 4.5 years and not 7 years. And so I have to deny Biden the person he thinks he would work best with at the Pentagon over 2.5 years.
If the rule shouldn't be 7 years, we should change the rule. It should be 4 years. I mean, why is the rule there if we're not going to adhere to it? I think, we start eroding norms, then where does it end? That's the thing.
Well, it
sounds like ridiculous with Donald Trump as president to be worried about this. But, if you're going to care about norms, then there's checks.
There's norms and there are arbitrary rules. There's nothing magic about the number 7. It's not like when you hit that 7-year day, all of a sudden you are wholly removed from the Pentagon bureaucracy and have a fresh look. But if it's 6 years and 11 months, you are entrenched and cannot be a reformer and cannot challenge the military brass. So the principle of civilian control should remain, which is why the President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief and not the Secretary of Defense. That principle holds whether or not Lloyd Austin is the Defense Secretary or not.
No, I think you make a good argument there. I'm not, this is not a hill I'm going to die on. But I do think that Biden really got off to a great start, and just kind of pitch perfect for a long time after being declared the winner. Although we should only count the legal votes, of course. But I do think I'm starting to get, mildly concerned. I'm going to have to make a Bidenometer.
Well, but to that point, I do think this shows how hard this is. It is not easy to pick a cabinet. I mean, here's someone who you literally can't think of anybody in history who's been more familiar with the inner workings of government than Joe Biden, who has more personal relationships of people in government than Joe Biden.
George H.W. Bush.
I don't know, just in terms of sheer longevity, if that's right. I mean, obviously he's in that echelon, but I don't. You have to go back and count the years. When did Bush? When did he first dip his toe in to federal politics?
That's a tough one.
I mean, Biden is literally 44 years. He has 36 in Senate, 8 as VP.
I think, though, that I would argue that because Bush served in Congress and vice president and head of the CIA.
Well, CIA and RNC chair, liaison to China.
So he's got different perspectives.
Yes.
Whereas Biden was just two of the three.
And Bush had one of the worst cabinet flops in John Tower. Straight up rejected on the floor for his drunkenness and sexual misconduct. And surely a preventable problem on his part. But when you're having to name all sorts of people, and in the case of Biden, you're vetting them for possible scandals. You're making sure they have the right kind of qualifications. You're trying to make sure you have enough balance when it comes to diversity on a whole host of fronts. And you don't even know who controls the Senate yet and whose votes you need to get these people confirmed. That's a lot of balls to juggle. And so it's not shocking and it may be ridiculous that like our standards have like immediately, jumped tenfold from where they were with Donald Trump. But it only goes to show that no matter what happens, people find things to complain about.
Sure.
And it's impossible to perfectly gauge like what's going to be an acceptable concern or what's going to be an unacceptable concern. Something's going to trip you up somewhere down the line.
Well, apparently Biden has now assigned somebody to be in charge of conservative outreach. I don't know if you saw this.
I did not see this. This was today?
No, it's like yesterday. And so...
Who is that person?
What's that?
Is the person named?
The person is named. It's like, I think, a former congressman or something. You should Google it while I'll riff here for a second. It's unclear to me whether this person is going to just do outreach to like Republican House members or whether this person is going to do outreach to me, is going to be like reaching out to, people such as yours truly. But it would be neat if there were someone, kind of on that front, keeping an eye out for, I'm not willing to go David Brooks and talk about the crease and Joe Biden's slacks. But, would I be ushered into a White House meeting? Yes, I would.
So this is from the 7th. So I don't know if something happened since this article. Biden plans to create a position to find common ground with conservatives, said Congressman Cedric Richmond, who is going to be director of Office of Public Engagement. Quote, right now I'm trying to set up the office, and I'm actually looking at establishing a position that reached out to conservatives because it's about moving forward. We cannot stay where we are. So that was 3 days ago. So it'd be within the Department of the Office of Public Engagement.
Okay.
So I don't know if he named somebody.
I think conservative outreach needs to be a cabinet level position. And I would recommend my friend Michael Weir, who was involved in the faith-based initiatives for Obama.
Hey, my daughter here, who's remote learning, needs some computer help. Should we wrap?
Let's wrap. Check us out at DMZ Show on Twitter. Ideally, we will do a DM Zoom tomorrow, Bill.
Yep. And just two things to plug quickly. Of course, my new podcast, When America Worked,
Yes.
already a sensation, but be the first on your block to listen, going to shareable.com or any of your favorite podcast services. Also, last night, as part of my job as vice president of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum Standing Committee, I interviewed the great Rashad Thomas on Calvin Coolidge and his record on civil rights. And that was a Zoom event, and it should be released on video today or tomorrow through the library. So I'll probably share that on Twitter and Facebook once that's up, but be on the lookout for that.
Okay, and just real quick, Bill, without getting embroiled in a discussion, was Coolidge, what grade for his era, what grade would you give Coolidge on civil rights?
I'm not going to answer that question because in my role as vice president of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Library and Museum Standing Committee, it is not our charge to tell you what to think about Coolidge and his record, but to give you the information and historical context. And we've created a page of those resources at the library's website. and it is very complex, and there's different interpretations, and you can find those different interpretations on that resource page.
All right. We'll see you next week in the DMZ.
Take care.
Thanks.